At Sunday dinner with my extended family, my 32-year-old son, Marcus, stands up wineglass in hand and announces to everyone that I'm a pathetic loser compared to his mother's new husband, Brad. The room falls silent as 20 relatives stare. My daughter, Emma, looks horrified. My brother, Frank, clenches his fist. But I just smile gently and continue cutting my steak. What Marcus doesn't know is that I've been quietly investigating Brad for 3 months, and what I've discovered will destroy everything. The trouble started 3 months before that horrible dinner on a humid Tuesday afternoon in late June. I was trimming the hedges outside my modest 2-story colonial when Diane, my ex-wife of 8 years, pulled up in a gleaming white Mercedes I'd never seen before. She stepped out wearing designer sunglasses and a smile that reminded me why I'd fallen for her 35 years ago, before money became her religion. "Cleon?" She said, her voice honey-sweet, in that way that always meant she wanted something. "I have wonderful news. I'm getting married again." I set down my pruning shears and wiped the sweat from my forehead. At 67, after a career helping the FBI track financial criminals, I'd learned to read people like spreadsheets. Something in Diane's eyes didn't add up. "Congratulations," I said simply. "Anyone I know?" "Brad Whitman. He's a tech entrepreneur. Very successful." She paused, studying my reaction. "The kids have met him. Marcus absolutely adores him." That stung more than I expected. Marcus had always been drawn to whoever flashed the most cash, even as a boy. While other kids collected baseball cards, he'd memorized the Forbes richest people list. I'd hoped he'd grow out of it, but at 32, working as a real estate agent, he still measured worth in dollar signs. Over the next few weeks, I watched my son transform. Where he used to tolerate our monthly fishing trips, now he canceled them. "Brad's taking me to his country club," he'd say. "You understand, right, Dad? It's important for my business connections." The comparison started subtly. "Brad drives a Tesla Model S," Marcus mentioned during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. "Not that there's anything wrong with your Honda, Dad. Reliability is important too." Then came the lifestyle observations. "Brad just bought Mom a place in Westchester. 4,000 square feet, pool the works. But your little house has charm, Dad. Very cozy." Emma, my 28-year-old daughter, tried to run interference. She'd visit more often, bringing homemade cookies and staying for old movies. "Marcus is being an idiot," she'd say, curled up on my ancient leather couch. "You're worth 10 of this Brad character." But I could see the hurt in her eyes when Marcus would group text photos from expensive restaurants, Broadway shows, yacht parties. Always with Brad front and center, his arm around my son, like they were best friends. In every photo, Brad wore the same practiced smile that never quite reached his eyes. It was Patricia Wells who first made me suspicious. Patricia and I had worked together for 15 years before I retired from my consulting role with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We still met for coffee every month to swap stories and keep our minds sharp. "Funny thing," she said one morning at our usual diner, stirring sugar into her black coffee. "That name you mentioned last time, Brad Whitman, it pinged something in our database." I leaned forward, suddenly alert. "What kind of ping?" "Nothing concrete. Just a flag from the pattern recognition software. Similar profile to some cases we've seen. Tech entrepreneur appearing out of nowhere, targeting specific demographics." She gave me a meaningful look. "Divorced women over 50 with substantial assets." That afternoon, I made some calls to old colleagues. By evening, I had a research file started. Brad Whitman, according to his LinkedIn, had founded 3 successful tech companies. But when I dug deeper, the companies existed only as registered LLCs with virtual offices. The employee testimonials used stock photos. His Stanford MBA, the university, had no record of him. I kept my investigation quiet, especially from Marcus. My son had grown increasingly hostile whenever I expressed even mild concern about Brad. "You're jealous," he'd accused during our last face-to-face meeting. "You can't stand that Mom found someone successful while you're still living in the same old house, driving the same old car, being the same old Cleon. So when Frank called about hosting Sunday dinner for the whole family, I knew it would be tense. I prepared carefully, choosing my oldest cardigan, the one with the elbow patches that Diane always hated. I parked my 15-year-old Honda Civic between Brad's Porsche and Marcus's new BMW, another gift from his generous future stepfather. The dinner started pleasant enough. My sister Grace had made her famous pot roast. The cousins chatted about their kids. Emma sat beside me occasionally, squeezing my hand under the table when Marcus would make another snide comment about my quaint lifestyle. Then came the wine. Marcus had already had 3 glasses when he decided to make his toast. I watched him stand, swaying slightly, his face flushed with alcohol, and something else. Righteousness, maybe. Or the need to hurt me, the way he thought I'd hurt him by not being rich enough to matter. "I want to say something," Marcus announced, tapping his knife against his glass. The conversations died down. 20 faces turned toward us. All my life, I've watched my father live small. Same job, same house, same everything. I used to think that was noble, but now I see what real success looks like. He gestured toward Brad, who had the grace to look uncomfortable. Brad built empires while my father counted other people's money. Brad takes Mom to Paris. Dad took us camping in a tent that leaked. Emma started to stand, but I touched her wrist gently. "Let him finish," my eyes said. "You're a loser, Dad," Marcus said, his voice growing louder with each word. "Mom's new husband isn't, and everyone here knows it." The silence that followed was deafening. Grace dropped her fork. Frank's knuckles went white around his beer bottle. Emma had tears in her eyes. But I just smiled and continued cutting my steak into precise, even pieces. Because while Marcus was giving his cruel speech, I'd noticed something interesting. Brad's phone had buzzed 4 times, and with each buzz, he'd grown paler. His hands shook as he typed responses. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the cool air conditioning. I knew that look. I'd seen it hundreds of times in interrogation rooms. It was the look of a man whose past was catching up with him. What Marcus didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd already discovered Brad's real name wasn't Brad Whitman. It was Richard Kellerman, and he'd left a trail of financial destruction across 5 states. The FBI had been building a case for 2 years, and thanks to my investigation, they were about to close it. The morning after Marcus's public humiliation of me arrived gray and drizzling, matching my mood, as I drove to a small coffee shop in Tarrytown. Samuel Torres was already waiting in our usual back booth, a manila folder thick with documents beside his steaming mug. "Cleon," he greeted me, his weathered face serious. "You're not going to like what I found." Sam and I went back 23 years to the Meridian financial case. While I'd stayed with the Bureau as a consultant, he'd gone private, building one of the most respected investigation firms on the East Coast. When I'd called him about Brad, he'd taken the case immediately, no questions asked. I slid into the booth and signaled the waitress for coffee. "Show me everything." The first document made my stomach turn. Brad Whitman was just the latest in a series of identities. Bradley Watson in Arizona, William Bradford in Nevada, Brad Winters in Florida, and Robert Bradshaw in Texas. Each identity followed the same pattern. Appear in an affluent area, target recently divorced women over 50, establish a business presence, extract assets, disappear. 4 identities, 4 states, 12 victims that we know of. Sam said, pulling out photos of women who looked disturbingly like Diane. Same age range, same lonely eyes, same generous divorce settlements. Total losses exceed $6 million. I studied the timeline Sam had constructed. Brad never stayed anywhere longer than 18 months, just long enough to establish trust, gain access to accounts, and execute what he called wealth redistribution. We were at month 5 with Diane. "It gets worse," Sam continued, sliding over phone records. "Your boy Marcus isn't just a bystander." The highlighted calls made my chest tighten. 3 weeks after Brad met Diane, he and Marcus had begun regular communication. Not just casual stepfather steps and chats, but long strategy sessions often while Marcus was supposed to be showing houses. I had my tech guy enhance some security footage from the Regency Hotel, Sam said, producing grainy photos. Recognize this? The images showed Brad and Marcus in the hotel's business center documents spread between them. In one shot, I could make out property listings. In another, what looked like loan applications. They're planning something big. I muttered, pieces clicking together in my mind. Real estate. Sam nodded grimly. Your son's been showing Brad properties all over Westchester. But here's the thing, they're not looking to buy. They're setting up an investment fund. Greenfield Development Partners. Sounds legitimate, right? He pulled out incorporation documents. Marcus was listed as CEO, Brad as silent partner. The business address was a mailbox at a UPS store. Classic shell company structure. They've been approaching your family members, Sam continued. Your nephew Tony, your brother Frank's kid. He already wrote them a check for $50,000. Thinks he's getting in on the ground floor of the next big real estate boom. My coffee went cold as I processed this information. It was one thing for Brad to target Diane, but using my son to drain our entire family, that was a different level of predation. There's more, Sam said quietly. Emma called me yesterday. Said you should know, but didn't want to upset you directly. He handed me a bank document. My signature was on the bottom, authorizing Marcus as a signatory on my investment account. Except I'd never signed it. The forgery was good, but not perfect. They'd gotten the loop in my C wrong. When? I asked, though I already suspected. 2 weeks ago. Same day, Marcus brought those papers by for you to review for estate planning. You remember the ones you said you'd look at later? I remembered. Marcus had been unusually chatty that day, trying to keep me in the kitchen while his briefcase sat open in my study. I'd thought nothing of it at the time. He doesn't know you moved most of your money after the divorce, Sam observed. That account only has about $20,000, but it shows intent. Intent. The word hung between us like a guilty verdict. My own son had tried to steal from me. What about Diane? I asked, dreading the answer. Sam pulled out more financial records. She's already given Brad power of attorney for her investment accounts. About $400,000 in total. He's been making withdrawals small at first, now larger. She probably doesn't even know. Too busy planning the wedding. The wedding. Set for next month at the St. Regis. Diane had sent me an invitation out of courtesy, though we both knew I wouldn't attend. Now I wondered if there would even be a wedding, or if Brad would vanish before then, taking everything with him. I need you to do something for me, I said, making a decision. Can you get trackers on their vehicles, Brad's and Marcus's? Sam smiled for the first time that morning. Already done. Brad goes interesting places. That country club he brags about his membership was revoked for bounce checks. But he still drives there every day, sits in the parking lot making calls. And Marcus? Your son's been busy. 3 trips to nursing homes in the past week. High-end places. The kind that specialize in memory care. The implication hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just after my money. They were planning to have me declared incompetent. I spent the rest of the day in my home office building my case file. Everything Sam had found, plus my own research. Brad's previous victims' court records from other states, the pattern of elderly fathers, in-law, who suddenly developed dementia right before their assets were transferred. As evening approached, Emma stopped by with dinner. She took one look at the papers spread across my desk and sank into a chair. How bad is it, Dad? I couldn't lie to her. Your brother's in deep, sweetheart. Brad's got him convinced they're building an empire together. Marcus doesn't realize he's being set up as the fall guy. Can you stop it? She asked, her voice small. I pulled her into a hug, breathing in her vanilla shampoo, the same brand she'd used since high school. I'm going to try, but I need to be smart about it. If Brad suspects I'm on to him, he'll accelerate his timeline. What do you need me to do? Keep being yourself. Visit Marcus, stay friendly, but document everything. And I pulled back to look at her. Be careful. Men like Brad don't like loose ends. That night I sat in my darkened living room thinking about the son I'd raised. The little boy who'd insisted on wearing a suit to kindergarten because successful people dress for success. The teenager who'd mowed lawns, not for spending money, but to build capital. When had ambition become greed? When had drive become disdain for anyone who chose a different path? My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Wells. Bureau's interested. Can you meet Thursday? I typed back a simple yes and set the phone aside. Through my window, I could see the house where Marcus had grown up. The tire swing still hung from the oak tree, motionless in the still air. I'd taught him to ride a bike in that driveway, bandaged his knees when he fell, cheered when he finally succeeded. Now I had to save him from himself, even if it meant destroying the illusion of success he'd built around Brad. Even if it meant sending my own son to prison. The rain had stopped, but storm clouds still gathered on the horizon. I closed my eyes and began planning my next moves. In financial crimes like chess, the winner was usually the one who could see the most moves ahead. Brad thought he was playing Marcus. Marcus thought he was playing me. But I'd been playing this game longer than both of them. And I never lost when family was at stake. Thursday morning arrived crisp and clear, one of those perfect September days that made you forget winter was coming. I dressed carefully for my FBI meeting. My best suit, the charcoal gray one Emma had bought me for her college graduation. If I was going to take down a con man who'd fooled my entire family, I needed to look like the federal consultant I used to be, not the harmless retiree my son thought I'd become. Patricia Wells met me in the Bureau's New York field office, the same conference room where we'd planned operations for 15 years. She wasn't alone. Assistant Director James Crawford sat at the head of the table, along with two younger agents I didn't recognize. Cleon. Crawford shook my hand warmly. Wish we were meeting under better circumstances. Patricia's briefed us on your situation. Richard Kellerman, or Brad, as your family knows him, has been on our radar for 30 months. They spread out their files, a depressing mirror to my own research. More victims, more states, more shattered lives. But there was something new. Brad wasn't working alone anymore. Gerald Morrison. Patricia pointed to a photograph of a distinguished-looking man in his 60s. Divorce attorney, member of the New York State Bar for 30 years. He's been Brad's silent partner for the last 3 schemes. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Diane's lawyer. The same. He identifies wealthy divorcees through his practice, assesses their assets, then introduces them to Brad at carefully orchestrated social events. Your ex-wife was targeted from the moment she filed for divorce. I thought back to Diane's gushing description of meeting Brad at a charity gala Morrison had invited her to. The chance encounter. At the bar. The immediate chemistry. The whirlwind romance. All choreographed. We've been building a RICO case, Crawford continued, but we need someone on the inside. Someone who can get close without raising suspicion. I'm already suspicious in their eyes, I said. Marcus thinks I'm a jealous old fool. Brad probably sees me as an obstacle to remove. Exactly. Patricia smiled, and I recognized the expression from dozens of successful operations. That's why you're going to become exactly what they expect, a confused, vulnerable old man with more money than sense. The plan they outlined was elegant in its simplicity. I would start showing signs of confusion, forgetfulness, mild dementia. Nothing dramatic, just enough to make Marcus think his nursing home research might be justified. Meanwhile, I'd dangle bait. Brad couldn't resist a fictional veteran's pension worth $2 million. My military record's sealed, I said, thinking it through. Brad can't verify it. We'll backstop it, Crawford assured me. Create enough digital breadcrumbs to make it believable if he goes looking. The key is making him think he's discovered it on his own. Over the next week, I began my performance. It started small. I called Marcus twice in one day, forgetting we'd already spoken. I missed Emma's birthday dinner, then showed up the next night, confused about the date. At the family barbecue, I told the same story 3 times, each version slightly different. Dad's been off lately. I heard Marcus tell Emma when they thought I was napping on Frank's couch. Maybe it's time we talked about his future care. Emma, bless her, played her part perfectly. He does seem more forgetful, but nursing homes are so expensive. Not if we manage his assets properly, Marcus said, and I could hear Brad's influence in every word. It's about quality of life, Em. Don't you want what's best for Dad? The next phase required more careful orchestration. I had Sam's tech specialist create a fake investment statement showing a Department of Defense pension account worth $2,300,000 payable only to me or my designated power of attorney. I left it on my kitchen table during one of Marcus's visits, partially covered by grocery circulars. He took the bait immediately. I watched from the hallway as he photographed the document with his phone. Within an hour, according to Sam's surveillance, he was meeting Brad at a Starbucks, both of them hunched over Marcus's phone like prospectors who'd struck gold. The nursing home visits intensified. Marcus brought brochures to my house, leaving them strategically placed. Just in case, Dad, he'd say. Some of these places are really nice, like resorts. Golden Acres, Sunset Manor, Whispering Pines, all expensive, all specializing in patients with cognitive challenges, all requiring immediate liquidation of assets for admission. Brad, meanwhile, turned up the charm. He started joining Marcus on visits, bringing expensive scotch and cigars. Cleon, he'd say, clapping me on the shoulder like we were old friends. You've had such an amazing career. You deserve to relax now. Let the younger generation handle things. I played along, accepting the scotch, pretending to confuse names and dates. But I was also documenting everything. The hidden cameras Sam had installed captured Brad and Marcus, discussing their plans in my living room while they thought I was dozing. The old man's perfect, Brad said in one recording. Clean background, no criminal record, decorated veteran. Once he's in Golden Acres, you'll have full power of attorney. We liquidate everything, pay ourselves consulting fees through Greenfield, and by the time anyone notices, we're gone. What about Emma? Marcus asked, showing the first hint of conscience I'd seen in months. What about her? She gets her inheritance when he actually dies. We're just managing things until then. The coldness in their planning might have broken me if I hadn't spent decades dealing with financial predators. But what really turned my stomach was Marcus's next question. And my mother. Her money's already in play, right? Don't worry about Diane, Brad assured him. I've got that handled. Focus on your father. The faster we move, the better. Patricia had been right. They were accelerating their timeline. The wedding was 3 weeks away, but Brad would be gone long before then, taking Diane's money, our family's investments, and leaving Marcus to face the consequences alone. I met with Crawford again, this time in a secure location away from the office. The U.S. attorney was ready to move, but we needed more evidence of the conspiracy. Specifically, we needed Brad and Morrison together, discussing their scheme. I might have a way, I said, remembering something from Sam's surveillance reports. Morrison has a cabin in the Catskills. Brad goes there sometimes, always alone, always nervous. You think that's where they meet? Worth checking out. 2 days later, Sam confirmed it. Hidden cameras at the cabin had captured Brad and Morrison, going over financial documents, discussing their previous victims by name, laughing about the stupid old widows who'd fallen for their act. But the real smoking gun came from an unexpected source. One of Brad's previous victims, Margaret Hoffman from Phoenix, had recorded their final conversation before he'd disappeared with her life savings. She'd never told police, too ashamed of being fooled. But Patricia had found her during the investigation, and she was ready to testify. He told me I reminded him of his dead mother, Margaret said in the recording, her voice shaking with anger. Said he'd never felt so connected to anyone. Then he took everything and vanished, left me with nothing but debt and humiliation. The same lines he'd used on Diane, the same promises, the same fake vulnerability. a script perfected over years of practice. As we built our case, I continued my performance at home. The confused old man, the easy mark. It was exhausting pretending to be less than I was watching my son's growing excitement as he thought his payday approached. Then came the intervention. Marcus arrived on a Tuesday morning with two men in white coats. Doctors. He said, though I recognized them as orderlies from Golden Acres. Behind them stood a woman with a clipboard and cold eyes. "Dad, these nice people just want to talk to you," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false concern. "About your health." I sat in my armchair, the picture of vulnerable confusion. "Is it time for my pills already?" The woman, Dr. Sharon Klein, according to her badge, began her evaluation. Simple questions at first, the date, the president, my address. I answered correctly, but slowly, adding just enough hesitation to seem uncertain. "Mr. Mitchell," she said, though my name is Cleon. I didn't correct her. "Your son is concerned about your ability to live independently. Can you tell me about your daily routine?" I launched into a rambling story about my neighbor's cat, switching topics, mid-sentence, circling back to details that didn't matter. Classic dementia presentation learned from watching too many training videos on financial elder abuse. "Interesting," Dr. Klein made notes. "And your medications?" I listed vitamins as heart medicine, aspirin as diabetes pills. Marcus nodded encouragingly at each mistake. But then, I shifted tactics. Just for a moment, I let the mask slip. I looked directly at Dr. Klein with completely clear eyes and said, "You know, Dr. Medicare fraud is a serious federal offense. Accepting bribes to falsely diagnose dementia can result in loss of license and up to 10 years in prison." The color drained from her face. She glanced at Marcus, then back at me. I immediately returned to my confused expression, mumbling about needing to feed the cat I didn't have. "I think we've seen enough," Dr. Klein said, quickly standing. "Mr. Mitchell appears to be managing adequately at present. We'll revisit in a few months." Marcus tried to object, but the doctors were already leaving. He followed them outside, and through my window I watched him arguing, probably offering more money. But Dr. Klein kept shaking her head, backing away from him, like he was contaminated. Smart woman. She'd recognized a setup when she saw one. That night I called Patricia. "They're getting desperate. How much more do you need?" "Just a little longer, Cleon. Crawford wants them to actually attempt the asset transfer. We need them caught in the act, not just planning." So I waited, playing my part, watching my son transform from misguided to malicious. Each day brought new pressure. Marcus had papers for me to sign. "Just routine stuff, Dad." Brad increased his visits, always steering conversation toward my fictional pension. The trap was set. Now we just needed them to walk into it. What none of them knew was that every document they'd prepared, every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer order, had been cataloged and analyzed by the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. The nursing home they'd chosen was cooperating with federal authorities. The bank accounts they'd set up were being monitored. Even Gerald Morrison's supposedly secure communications were compromised, thanks to a warrant Patricia had obtained based on the cabin recordings. As I sat alone in my house that night, I thought about the story I'd tell at Marcus's trial. How a father's love had driven me to save my son from himself, even if it meant sending him to prison. How sometimes the greatest act of love was letting someone face the consequences of their choices. But first, we had to catch them. And Brad, for all his flaws, was smart. He'd survived 5 states worth of schemes. He wouldn't go down easily. The chess match was entering its final phase. Every piece was in position. Now came the endgame. And I'd learned long ago that in chess, as in financial crimes, the key to victory was letting your opponent think they were winning right until the moment you said checkmate. The morning of October 15th started like any other, except for the FBI surveillance van, parked 3 houses down, disguised as a plumbing truck. I knew Patricia was inside with her team, recording everything, waiting for Brad and Marcus to make their final move. I didn't have to wait long. At 9 sharp, Marcus arrived with his entourage, the same two orderlies from Golden Acres. Dr. Klein, apparently, her fear of federal prison was less than her greed, and a new addition, a stern-looking man in a cheap suit carrying a briefcase. "Morning, Dad," Marcus said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Remember Dr. Klein? She's back for a follow-up evaluation." I stayed in character, offering them coffee, forgetting I'd already made a pot, asking Marcus twice why he was visiting on a Thursday when it was clearly Monday. But this time, I'd prepared something special. Hidden in my pocket was my phone recording everything. More importantly, I'd stationed Emma in my home office with access to my security system. If things went sideways, she could alert Patricia immediately. "Mr. Mitchell." Dr. Klein began, apparently deciding to stick with the wrong name. "We've reviewed your case, and we have some concerns." The evaluation this time was more aggressive. She asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens, to remember 3 words, and repeat them after 5 minutes to draw a clock showing 3:15. I deliberately failed each test, but not too obviously. The art was in seeming like I was trying, but couldn't quite manage. "I'm afraid," Dr. Klein said with practiced sympathy, "that your father shows clear signs of progressive cognitive decline. I'm recommending immediate transition to a managed care facility." "No," I said, showing the stubbornness they expected. "This is my home. Margaret wouldn't want me to leave." Margaret was my sister, who died 15 years ago, a fact Marcus knew well. "Dad." Marcus knelt beside my chair, the picture of a concerned son. "Aunt Margaret's gone, remember? And you need help. We've found a wonderful place, Golden Acres. They'll take such good care of you." The man with the briefcase stepped forward. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm Arnold Wexler from Adult Protective Services." Another lie. Sam had already run him. He was a disbarred attorney who now worked as a consultant for nursing homes. "Given Dr. Klein's evaluation, we need to ensure your affairs are in order. Do you have power of attorney designated?" I don't remember," I said, letting my voice waver. "Maybe in my office. Marcus knows where I keep important papers." Marcus practically ran to my office. I heard him rifling through my filing cabinet, finding the documents he'd planted there weeks ago. The ones with my forged signature, making him my financial power of attorney. "Found them." He returned triumphant, handing the papers to Wexler. "See, Dad already signed these. He must have forgotten." Wexler made a show of reviewing the documents. "These appear to be in order. Mr. Mitchell, do you remember signing these?" I stared at the papers, squinting, turning them upside down. "Is this about my pension?" "The military one." Marcus and Wexler exchanged glances. "Yes, Dad," Marcus said quickly. "We need to make sure your pension is protected. That's why you're signing these papers." "But I already signed them," I said, confused. "You just said so." "These are different papers." Wexler produced a stack of documents from his briefcase. "These transfer your assets to a protected trust that Marcus will manage for your care." There it was. The smoking gun Patricia needed. I pretended to read the documents, running my finger under the words like a child learning to read. In reality, I was memorizing the account numbers. The shell company names the elaborate structure they'd created to steal not just my fictional pension, but every cent I'd saved over 40 years. "Where do I sign?" I asked finally. Marcus couldn't hide his excitement. He guided my hand to each signature line, watching greedily as I slowly wrote my name. What he didn't notice was that I was subtly altering my signature, each time making them clearly different from the forgeries he'd already submitted to my bank. "Perfect." Wexler gathered the papers. "Now we'll need you to pack a few things. Golden Acres has an opening today." "Today?" I stood unsteadily. "But I haven't said goodbye to anyone. Emma doesn't know." "We'll tell Emma," Marcus assured me. "She'll visit you all the time." I shuffled to my bedroom, taking my time playing up the confusion. Behind me, I heard Marcus on the phone. "Brad, yeah, we got it. Every signature. No, he has no idea. The transfer should go through by end of business today. In my bedroom, I packed slowly, methodically. Medications I didn't take, reading glasses. I didn't need photos of family members whose names I pretended to forget. All while the FBI recorded every word from the living room. $2 million in that DOD pension alone, Marcus was saying. Plus his investment accounts, the house equity. We're looking at close to $3 million total. Beautiful. Brad's voice came through the speakerphone. Morrison's already got buyers lined up for the house. Cash deal, quick close. Your old man won't even know it's gone. What about Mom? Marcus asked. Her wedding's in 2 weeks. Brad's laugh was cold. Your mother's accounts were cleaned out yesterday. She just doesn't know it yet. By the time she figures it out, I'll be in Costa Rica. You should think about a vacation too, son. Maybe somewhere without extradition. The silence that followed was deafening. I could practically hear Marcus's world tilting off its axis. What do you mean, Costa Rica? We're partners. Greenfield Development. Remember? Oh, Marcus. Brad's voice dripped condescension. Did you really think I'd stick around after this score? You're the one whose name is on everything. The forged documents, the fraudulent transfers, the elder abuse. I'm just a concerned family friend who tried to help. I chose that moment to return to the living room, suitcase in hand. Marcus's face had gone pale, his phone slack in his hand. Dr. Klein and Wexler were already edging toward the door, sensing something had shifted. Is everything all right? I asked, letting a hint of clarity enter my voice. Marcus, you look upset. He stared at me, then at his phone, then back at me. Dad, The front door burst open. Not dramatically, but with the controlled precision of federal agents who'd done this 1,000 times. Patricia entered, first FBI badge, visible, followed by 4 other agents. Marcus Mitchell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit elder fraud, forgery, and financial exploitation. She turned to the others. Dr. Klein, Mr. Wexler, please put your hands behind your backs. The room erupted in chaos. Wexler tried to run, but didn't make it past the foyer. Dr. Klein collapsed into a chair, crying. The orderlies raised their hands immediately, smart enough to know when they were outmatched. But Marcus just stood there staring at me as an agent cuffed him. Dad, what's happening? Are you okay? I straightened fully, the confused old man act falling away like a discarded costume. I'm fine, son. Been fine all along. You knew. His voice cracked like he was 13 again, caught in a lie about homework. This whole time. Since the beginning. I pulled out my phone, showing him it had been recording. Every conversation, every forged document, every plan to steal from your family and dump me in a home. But the confusion, the forgetting? An act, just like Brad's successful entrepreneur routine. Only difference is, I was acting to save you. He was acting to destroy you. Patricia stepped forward. We've got Brad in custody. Picked him up at JFK trying to board a flight to San Jose. Gerald Morrison's in interrogation, now giving up every detail to save his own skin. Marcus sagged in the agent's grip. The money. All frozen, Patricia confirmed. Your mother's accounts, the family members who invested everything Brad touched. We'll recover most of it. As they led him toward the door, Marcus turned back one last time. Why, Dad? Why not just tell me? I walked over to him close enough to see the tears he was fighting. Because you wouldn't have listened. You were so blinded by Brad's flash, so convinced I was a failure, you'd have thought I was jealous. You had to see for yourself what greed really costs. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I know. I touched his shoulder gently. That's why I'm going to hire you the best lawyer I can find. You're going to face consequences, Marcus, but you're also going to have a chance to make things right. They took him away then, along with the others. I stood in my suddenly empty house listening to the sirens fade. Emma emerged from the office, tears streaming down her face. How do you feel? She asked, wrapping her arms around me. Tired, I admitted, returning the hug. Sad, but also relieved. He's alive, Em. Prison's better than what Brad had planned for him once he'd outlived his usefulness. We spent the rest of the day at the FBI office, giving statements, reviewing evidence. The scope of Brad and Morrison's operation was staggering. 17 states, 43 victims, over $20 million stolen. Marcus was small fish compared to that, but he was still going away for a while. That evening, Diane called. Hysterical, didn't begin to describe her state. Cleon, my money, it's all gone. Brad's disappeared. The wedding venue says our check bounced, the caterer wants payment. I don't understand what's happening. Come over, I said simply. I'll explain everything. She arrived an hour later, mascara-streaked, designer dress wrinkled. For the first time in years, she looked her age. I made her tea and told her the whole story, start to finish. With each revelation, she seemed to shrink further into my couch. I was such a fool, she said finally. Blinded by his charm, his money. His fake money, I corrected gently. None of it was real, Diane. The cars were leased. The country club membership was fraudulent. Even the house he bought you is being foreclosed on. But you were real, she said, looking at me with something I hadn't seen in her eyes for a decade. Respect. You were always real, and I couldn't see it. I handed her a tissue. The FBI will recover what they can. You'll have to start over, but you won't be destitute. And Marcus? Facing 5 to 10 years, depending on how he cooperates. He'll testify against Brad and Morrison, help other victims recover their losses. It's his chance to finally do something worthwhile. We sat in silence for a while, drinking tea, processing the wreckage of the life she'd tried to build on lies. Finally, she stood to leave. Cleon. That story about the $2 million pension, that was fake, right? I smiled. Completely fabricated. I'm comfortable, but I'm not rich. Never have been, never will be. No, she said softly. You're something better. You're decent. After she left, I sat alone in my living room looking at photos of better times. Marcus at 5, grinning over a lemonade stand. At 15, proud in his first suit. At 25, getting his real estate license. Somewhere along the way, I'd lost him to the pursuit of easy money. But maybe, just maybe, this hard lesson would help me find him again. The house felt too quiet, so I called Emma. Want to come over and watch a movie? I'll make popcorn. Be right there, Dad. While I waited, I thought about the victims Brad had left in his wake. Women like Margaret Hoffman, who'd trusted and been betrayed. Families torn apart by greed. Dreams destroyed by deception. Tomorrow, I'd start helping Patricia contact each victim, walking them through the recovery process. It's what I did best, after all. Following the money, untangling the lies, bringing order to chaos. But tonight, I just wanted to watch a movie with my daughter and remember that not everything in life was about money. Some things like integrity and family couldn't be stolen no matter how clever the thief. The doorbell rang. Emma stood there with ice cream and a smile. Thought we could use dessert with our movie. Perfect, I said, meaning it. As we settled in to watch, I realized something. Marcus had called me a loser at that family dinner. But losers didn't catch international con artists. Losers didn't save their families from financial ruin. Losers didn't choose justice over easy silence. I might not be rich, but I'd won the only game that mattered. And someday, when Marcus got out of prison, maybe he'd understand that too. The movie started. Emma curled up beside me like she had as a little girl. And for a few hours, the world felt right again. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and testimony, and the long road to justice. But tonight, I was just a father who'd done what he had to do, even though it broke his heart. The Manhattan Federal Courthouse stood like a fortress of justice against the November sky, its limestone facade cold and imposing. I adjusted my tie in the security line, watching lawyers rush past with their rolling briefcases and pressed suits. 3 weeks had passed since the arrests, and today was Marcus's first formal interrogation with the federal prosecutor. Patricia met me in the lobby. He's been asking for you every day, she said, leading me through the maze of corridors. His lawyer says he won't fully cooperate unless he can talk to you first. How's he holding up? Better than most. Reality hit hard when he saw the full scope of Brad's operation. Your son's not a career criminal, Cleon. He got swept up in something bigger than he understood. The interrogation room was sterile, and windowless fluorescent lights humming overhead. Marcus sat at a metal table, orange jumpsuit hanging loose on his frame. He'd lost weight, his designer haircut grown shaggy. When he saw me, his eyes filled with tears. "Dad?" He started, then stopped, searching for words that wouldn't come. I sat across from him, studying the son I'd raised. Without his expensive clothes and confident swagger, he looked younger, vulnerable. The ambitious boy who'd worn suits to kindergarten was still there, buried under years of wrong choices. "Before we begin," I said, "I need you to know something. I'm here as your father, not as a witness. What you tell me today will determine how I help you moving forward." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I've been replaying everything in my cell. Every conversation with Brad, every lie I told, every time I looked at you with contempt for not being rich enough." His voice broke. "How did I become this person?" "That's what we're here to figure out," I said. "Start from the beginning. When did Brad first approach you?" The story that emerged over the next 2 hours was both worse and better than I'd imagined. Brad had studied Marcus for weeks before making contact, learning his weaknesses, his debts, his desperate need to appear successful. "He showed up at an open house I was hosting," Marcus explained. "This mansion in Scarsdale. Nobody else came, the market was dead, and I was about to lose my biggest listing. Then Brad walks in cash. Buyer wants to close immediately." It was a classic hook. Brad bought the property through one of his shell companies, making Marcus the commission hero of his office. Then came the invitations, drinks at exclusive clubs, introductions to connected people, promises of bigger deals. "Within a month, he had me believing we were partners," Marcus continued. "He said guys like us, we understood what real success looked like, not like my father who'd settled for mediocrity." The phrase stung even secondhand. I kept my expression neutral. "When did he bring up the scheme?" "Gradually. First, it was just talk about maximizing opportunities. Then, he mentioned how much money was wasted on elderly care, how families deserve to protect their assets. He made it sound noble, like we were helping." Assistant U.S. Attorney Rachel Chen entered then, all business, in her sharp black suit. "Mr. Mitchell, are you ready to make your formal statement?" What followed was a masterclass in unraveling deception. Marcus detailed every meeting, every forged document, every step of their plan. But the real revelations came when Chen showed him evidence he'd never seen. "Do you recognize this woman?" She placed a photo on the table. Marcus shook his head. "Should I?" "Dorothy Kellerman, 73, Brad's first known victim. Also, his mother." The blood drained from Marcus's face. His mother, but he said she died when he was young. "She's very much alive, living in a state facility in Ohio. Brad put her there after draining her retirement accounts. She has actual dementia now, possibly triggered by the trauma of her son's betrayal." Chen laid out photo after photo. Elderly victims from across the country, their stories eerily similar. The charming younger man, the whirlwind romance, or business partnership, the systematic theft of everything they'd worked for. "This was going to be you," Chen said, placing a document in front of Marcus. "We found this in Brad's apartment. A timeline for disposing of M. Mitchell once the assets were secured." Marcus read the cold clinical plan for his own destruction. Frame him for the entire scheme, leave evidence, pointing to gambling debts, disappear, while Marcus faced decades in prison. His hands shook as he pushed the paper away. "He recorded everything," Chen continued. "Every conversation where you expressed greed, every time you insulted your father, every moment that would make you look like the mastermind to a jury." "I want to play you something," Patricia said, pulling out a laptop. "This is from Brad's cloud storage, a conversation with Morrison from 6 months ago." Brad's voice filled the room. The Mitchell kid is perfect. Greedy, stupid, and desperate to prove he's better than his old man. Classic daddy issues. He'll do anything I suggest if he thinks it'll make him rich. Morrison's reply was equally cold. And the father? Former FBI but retired, probably going soft. The son hates him, which makes our job easier. We get the kid to turn on the father, then we burn the kid. Clean getaway. Marcus put his head in his hands. I'm such an idiot. Yes, I said quietly. You were. But you're also my son, and you're going to make this right. The rest of the day was spent in detailed testimony. Marcus gave them everything: account numbers, meeting locations, names of other potential victims Brad had been cultivating. With each revelation, the scope of the conspiracy grew. The pregnancy story Brad had told Diane turned even darker. He'd been drugging her with hormones to simulate pregnancy symptoms, planning to fake a miscarriage after securing her assets. The psychological cruelty was staggering. There's more, Marcus said hesitantly. Other families Brad was targeting. I have names, addresses. He made me scout them, look for vulnerabilities. He provided a list of 17 families, all with elderly parents and adult children struggling financially. Brad's next wave of victims saved by Marcus's arrest. That evening, we took a break. I'd arranged for Marcus to have a proper meal instead of jail food, and we sat in a secure room eating Chinese takeout like we had when he was young. Remember when I was 10? Marcus said suddenly. And I wanted to sell lemonade, but insisted on charging $5 a cup, because quality costs. I smiled. Nobody bought any. You sat there all day refusing to lower your price. Until you came out and bought a cup, gave me a 20 and said keep the change. He looked at me with wet eyes. You've been bailing me out my whole life, haven't you? That's what fathers do. Even when their sons call them losers in front of the entire family. Especially then. That's when sons need their fathers most. We finished eating in companionable silence. Then, Marcus asked the question I'd been dreading. What happens to me now? You cooperate fully. Testify against Brad and Morrison. Help recover the stolen money. Chen says if you do all that, you're looking at 3 to 5 years instead of 20. 3 years, he repeated softly. I'll be 35 when I get out. No career, no credibility, no future. Wrong, I said firmly. You'll have paid your debt. You'll have helped dozens of victims get justice, and you'll have a chance to rebuild honestly this time. Would you help me when I get out? I've already started a fund for your education. Real education this time, not shortcuts. Maybe accounting like your old man. Learn how money really works before you try to make it. The interrogation resumed, continuing late into the night. By the end, Marcus had given them enough to ensure Brad would never see freedom again. Morrison, facing disbarment and decades in prison, had already flipped, providing evidence of 6 other similar schemes over the past decade. As we prepared to leave, Chen pulled me aside. Your son's testimony is invaluable. He's showing genuine remorse, which is rare in financial crimes. I'll recommend the minimum sentence. Thank you, I said, meaning it. Don't thank me. Thank your son. He could have stayed silent, forced us to prove everything. Instead, he's trying to make amends. I found Marcus in holding, waiting for transport back to jail. Through the bars, he looked small and lost. Dad, what you did, the whole investigation, the acting. Why go through all that? Why not just warn me about Brad? Because you needed to see who these people really are. What greed really costs. A warning would have been words. This was education. Expensive education, he said with a rueful smile. The best kind usually is. As the guards prepared to take him away, Marcus called out one last time. Dad, I know I don't deserve it, but could you visit sometimes in prison? Every week, I promised. Every single week. I watched them lead him away. My son, the convict, the failed criminal, the cautionary tale. But also, my son, the repentant, the truth teller. The young man who might finally grow into someone worthwhile. Outside the courthouse, the November wind cut through my coat. I stood on the steps where defendants and lawyers posed for news cameras, but I had no interest in publicity. This wasn't a victory. It was a tragedy with the possibility of redemption. Emma was waiting in the car, having spent the day with Diane, helping her navigate bankruptcy paperwork and counseling services. "How did it go?" she asked as I climbed in. He told them everything, held nothing back. And Brad, facing life essentially, 25 years minimum, and he's already 53. We drove in silence for a while. Then Emma asked, "Do you think Marcus will be okay?" "Really okay." I thought about the broken man in the orange jumpsuit finally seeing clearly after years of golden blindness. "I think he has a chance. Prison will either finish breaking him or start rebuilding him. But at least he has a chance." "You gave him that chance," Emma said softly. "Another father might have let him fall." "Another father might not have raised a son who could fall so far," I replied. "Stop," Emma said firmly. "Marcus made his choices. You gave him values. He chose to ignore them. You showed him integrity. He chose greed. That's on him, not you." She was right, of course. But parental guilt doesn't follow logic. Every milestone of Marcus's descent would carry my what-ifs. What if I'd been wealthier? What if I'd fought harder for custody? What if I'd seen Brad coming sooner? That night, I sat in my study organizing the victim files Patricia had given me. Tomorrow, I'd start calling each one, walking them through the recovery process. It would take months, maybe years, but every dollar recovered was a small victory against the predators. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Then, I recognized it, the Federal Detention Center. "Dad, they let me send one message. Just wanted to say thank you for not giving up on me. I won't waste this second chance. Love, Marcus." I typed back simply, "Love you too, son. See you Sunday." The investigation would continue. The trials would be brutal. The consequences would reshape our entire family. But tonight, for the first time in years, I had hope that my son might finally become the man he was meant to be. Sometimes the hardest lessons teach us the most. Marcus was learning that now, stripped of everything fake, left with only the truth. And sometimes that's exactly where redemption begins. The trial of United States versus Richard Kellerman. Gerald Morrison and Marcus Mitchell began on a cold February morning with media trucks lining Center Street and reporters shoving microphones at anyone who looked connected to the case. I pushed through them in silence, Emma at my side, both of us dressed conservatively for what promised to be a spectacle. Inside courtroom 318, the atmosphere was electric. The gallery filled with victims from 17 states, elderly men and women who'd traveled far to see justice served. Margaret Hoffman from Phoenix sat in the front row, clutching a photo of her late husband. She'd lost him to a heart attack shortly after Brad stole their savings. Brad entered in Shackle's orange jumpsuit, replaced by an expensive suit that couldn't hide the fear in his eyes. 6 months in federal detention had aged him. The confident smile was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who knew his game was over. Morrison followed his attorney's arrogance, evaporated, leaving only a disbarred lawyer facing the consequences of a decade of deception. Then came Marcus. My son, my failure, my hope for redemption. He'd gained back some weight, and his lawyer had cleaned him up, but the cockiness that once defined him had vanished. He found my eyes in the gallery and nodded slightly, a universe of apology in that small gesture. Judge Catherine Brennan, known for her no-nonsense approach to financial crimes, called the court to order. What followed over the next 3 weeks was a systematic destruction of Brad's carefully constructed empire of lies. Rachel Chen opened for the prosecution with devastating precision. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you will hear about a conspiracy so calculated, so cruel, that it challenges our faith in human decency. The defendants didn't just steal money. They stole trust, dignity, and hope from society's most vulnerable members. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showed Brad had stolen over $23 million across 2 decades. Morrison had facilitated 37 fraudulent schemes, taking his cut while maintaining his respectable facade. And Marcus, young and foolish, had eagerly joined their latest venture, turning against his own father for the promise of easy wealth. Victim after victim took the stand. Dorothy Kellerman, Brad's own mother, testified via video link from her nursing facility. Her testimony was heartbreaking. "He was such a sweet boy," she said, confusion evident in her voice. "Always brought me flowers. Then one day the flowers stopped, and so did my savings. I don't understand what I did wrong." Margaret Hoffman flew in from Phoenix, her testimony sharp with righteous anger. "He looked me in the eye and said I reminded him of his grandmother. Said he'd never felt so safe with someone. I gave him everything my Harold left me. 47 years of savings gone in 6 weeks." The forensic evidence was equally damning. Patricia testified about the FBI's investigation, presenting charts showing the money flow between dozens of shell companies. Each transfer was annotated, traced, proven beyond doubt. Then came Brad's previous identities. 5 states, 5 names, 43 victims. The prosecutor displayed driver's licenses, each showing Brad's face with a different name: Bradley Watson, William Bradford, Brad Winters, Robert Bradshaw, and finally, Richard Kellerman, his real name. "The defendant has spent 20 years perfecting his craft," Chen told the jury. "He studied his victims, learned their vulnerabilities, and exploited them without mercy. This wasn't desperation. This was predation." Morrison's attorney tried to distance his client from Brad, painting him as a duped professional who'd made poor choices. That defense crumbled when the prosecution played recordings from the cabin, Morrison laughing about stupid widows and planning future scores. "I've got 3 more lined up." Morrison's voice echoed through the courtroom. "Recent divorces, substantial settlements, emotionally vulnerable, like shooting fish in a barrel." The courtroom collectively recoiled. Several jurors visibly struggled to maintain neutral expressions. When Marcus took the stand, the entire gallery held its breath. He testified for 2 full days, detailing every meeting, every plan, every moment of greed that had led him to betray his family. His voice rarely rose above a whisper, forcing everyone to lean forward, hanging on each shameful admission. "Brad made me feel important," Marcus testified. "Like I was finally becoming the success I'd always wanted to be. I was so blinded by his promises, I couldn't see he was using me." He paused, looking directly at me. "I couldn't see that real success had been in front of me my whole life." Under cross-examination, Brad's attorney tried to paint Marcus as the mastermind, the greedy son who'd dragged Brad into the scheme. Marcus didn't fight it. "I was greedy," he admitted. "I did want money. I did resent my father for not being wealthy. But I never would have acted on it without Brad showing me how. He took my worst impulses and weaponized them." The defense's case was weak. Brad testified on his own behalf, a desperate move that backfired spectacularly. He tried to claim the victims had all been willing participants in investment opportunities. But Chen's cross-examination was surgical. "Mr. Kellerman, is Dorothy Kellerman your mother?" "Yes." "Did you put her in a nursing home after taking her savings?" "She needed care." "Care you couldn't afford to provide because you'd stolen her money?" Brad's fabricated charm cracked. "You don't understand the pressure I was under. The pressure of maintaining 5 identities. The pressure of keeping 43 victims from discovering your fraud. Help us understand, Mr. Kellerman." By the time Chen finished, Brad looked like a broken marionette, all his strings cut. The verdict came on day 19. I sat between Emma and, surprisingly, Diane. My ex-wife had been attending every day, slowly coming to terms with how thoroughly she'd been deceived. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Brennan asked. "We have, Your Honor." Richard Kellerman, a.k.a. Brad, guilty on all 47 counts. The foreperson's voice was steady as she read each charge. wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering conspiracy, elder abuse. The FBI had even added identity theft for his multiple personas. Gerald Morrison guilty on 32 counts. His legal knowledge had made him a more careful criminal, but not careful enough. Then came Marcus. My son stood as his fate was read. On the charge of conspiracy to commit wire fraud guilty. On the charge of attempted elder financial abuse guilty. On the charge of forgery guilty. 5 counts total. The prosecution had kept their word, charging him only with his direct actions, not the broader conspiracy. It was more mercy than he deserved, but exactly what he needed. Sentencing came 6 weeks later. I submitted a letter on Marcus's behalf, as did Emma, and surprisingly, 3 of the victims who'd been moved by his complete cooperation and evident remorse. Judge Brennan addressed each defendant individually. To Brad, Mr. Kellerman, you are perhaps the most callous financial predator I've encountered in 20 years on the bench. You targeted the elderly, the vulnerable, your own mother. You showed no mercy, and you deserve none. She sentenced him to 45 years in federal prison, with restitution of $23 million. At 53, it was effectively a life sentence. Morrison received 20 years plus permanent disbarment and restitution. The legal community had turned its back on him completely. Finally, Marcus stood for sentencing. Judge Brennan studied him for a long moment. Mr. Mitchell, you present this court with a dilemma. Your actions were reprehensible. You betrayed your father, the man who raised you, protected you, and ultimately saved you from a worse fate. However, your cooperation has been exemplary. Your remorse appears genuine, and your youth suggests the possibility of rehabilitation. She paused, the courtroom silent. I sentence you to 60 months in federal prison with the possibility of reduction to 36 months, based on continued cooperation and good behavior. Upon release, you will serve 3 years probation and complete 500 hours of community service with elder fraud victims. Marcus sagged with relief. 3 to 5 years. He'd be out before 40, young enough to rebuild. As the marshals prepared to lead them away, Brad turned to Marcus with pure hatred. You destroyed everything, you stupid kid. Marcus met his gaze steadily. No, Brad. You destroyed everything. I just finally told the truth about it. After the verdicts, the real work began. The FBI's asset recovery team had frozen millions in accounts across the country, and 3 offshore havens. I volunteered to help trace the money using my forensic accounting skills to untangle Brad's web of transactions. It took months, but we recovered nearly $18 million. Not everything, but enough to make most victims substantially whole. Margaret Hoffman got back 80% of her savings. Dorothy Kellerman's care was fully funded for life. Even Diane recovered enough to start over, though she'd have to work again for the first time in decades. I visited Marcus every Sunday at the federal facility in Otisville. The minimum security prison was known for its financial criminals and white-collar convicts men who'd chased money into catastrophe. I'm taking classes, Marcus told me during one visit 6 months into his sentence. Accounting ethics psychology, trying to understand how I became someone who could do what I did. And fear, he said simply. Fear of being ordinary. Fear of not mattering. Brad saw that fear and fed it until it consumed everything good in me. We developed a routine. Chess games, discussions about his studies, plans for the future. He was earning his bachelor's degree in accounting, following in my footsteps 20 years late, but with hard-won wisdom. I want to help people when I get out, he said during one visit. Maybe work with the elderly, protecting them from people like Brad, like me. Like who you were, I corrected. You're not that person anymore. The FBI offered me a full-time position consulting on elder fraud cases. I accepted, finding purpose in protecting others from the predators who'd nearly destroyed my family. Emma joined me, using her social work degree to counsel victims. One day, about a year after the trial, Patricia called with interesting news. Remember the list Marcus gave us? The 17 families Brad was planning to target next? Of course. We've contacted all of them. Every single one wants to thank Marcus for the warning. One family avoided losing their father's entire pension. Another caught their own Brad trying to infiltrate their lives. I shared the news with Marcus during our next visit. He cried the first tears I'd seen since his sentencing. I saved people. Your honesty saved them. Your cooperation. Your choice to finally do the right thing. As his release date approached, we made plans. Marcus would live with me initially, work in my consulting practice, rebuild his life one honest day at a time. Several victims had written letters supporting his early release, moved by his efforts to help recover their assets. The parole hearing was emotional. Margaret Hoffman testified via video link, the same woman who'd lost everything to Brad. This young man made terrible choices, she said. But he also made the brave choice to tell the truth when it mattered. He helped get my money back. More importantly, he helped me understand how it happened, why Harold and I fell for the lies. I believe he deserves a second chance. The board agreed. Marcus was released after serving exactly 3 years, walking out of Otisville on a bright March morning. Emma and I waited at the gate, watching him emerge in civilian clothes that hung loose on his frame. He stopped a few feet from us, uncertain. "Hi, Dad. Emma broke first, rushing to hug him. I followed, and we stood there, our broken family beginning to heal. The drive home was quiet until Marcus spoke. "I know I can never fully make up for what I did, but I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying." "That's all anyone can do," I said. We pulled into my driveway, the same house Marcus had mocked as too small, too modest. He stared at it like he was seeing it for the first time. "It's perfect," he whispered. Inside, I'd set up his old room as an office. Diploma frames waited empty for the degrees he'd earn. A desk held study materials for the Certified Fraud Examiner exam. On the wall, I'd hung a photo from Better Times Marcus at 10 selling overpriced lemonade, still innocent of what greed could cost. "Welcome home, son," I said. He nodded, unable to speak, and got to work. 3 years after walking out of federal prison, Marcus stood before a room full of senior citizens at the Westchester Community Center, preparing to tell his story. I sat in the back row, watching my son face his past to protect others' futures. "Good morning." He began, his voice steady but humble. "My name is Marcus Mitchell, and I'm a convicted felon. I spent 3 years in federal prison for trying to steal my father's life savings and have him declared incompetent. I'm here to tell you how it happened, and more importantly, how you can protect yourself from people like who I used to be." The room was silent, 70 faces studying him with mixtures of curiosity and caution. These were exactly the people Brad had targeted, exactly the demographic Marcus had once viewed as easy marks. Now he stood before them as both warning and protector. He told his story without euphemism or excuse. The greed, the betrayal, the moment he'd stood in front of his family and called his father a loser. Several audience members gasped when he described the forged documents, the planned institutionalization, the cold calculation of turning family into finance. "The man who recruited me was a professional con artist," Marcus explained, clicking through a presentation he'd developed. "But he couldn't have succeeded without my cooperation. He found my weakness, greed, and insecurity, and exploited it. That's what predators do. They find the crack in your armor and wedge it open." An elderly woman raised her hand. "How do we know you're not still that person? Why should we trust you?" Marcus nodded, expecting the question. "You shouldn't trust me. That's the first lesson. Verify everything regardless of who tells you. Even family members can be compromised. My father trusted me, and I betrayed him. If he hadn't been a retired FBI financial analyst, I would have succeeded." He spent the next hour detailing the red flags of elder financial abuse. The sudden new friend, or romantic interest. The family member suddenly interested in finances. The pressure to sign documents quickly. The isolation from other family members. With each point, He used examples from his own crimes, showing how easily trust could be weaponized. My father saved me, Marcus concluded, not just from prison, but from becoming someone irredeemable. Every day, I work to earn the second chance he gave me. Part of that work is making sure what happened to my family doesn't happen to yours. Afterward, several attendees approached him with questions. One man wanted advice about his grandson's sudden interest in his will. A woman worried about her daughter's new boyfriend, who seemed too interested in her pension. Marcus handled each concern professionally, providing resources and referral numbers for elder law attorneys and financial advisors. I waited until the room cleared before approaching. That was excellent, son. 63rd presentation this year, he said, packing up his materials. Gets a little easier each time, but the shame never quite goes away. It shouldn't. That shame keeps you honest. We walked to the parking lot together, the October air crisp with autumn's arrival. 3 years of freedom had transformed Marcus. Gone was the flashy dresser, obsessed with appearances. In his place stood a man who understood that true worth had nothing to do with wealth. Dad, I got a call yesterday, he said as we reached our cars. The FBI wants to hire me full-time. Special consultant on elder fraud working with Patricia's team. I'd known this was coming. Marcus had been volunteering with the Bureau for 2 years, his unique perspective invaluable in understanding how family members could be turned into weapons against their own blood. What did you tell them? That I needed to talk to you first. It would mean working together sometimes. I didn't know if you'd be comfortable with that. I looked at my son, thinking of the journey we'd taken. From the bitter young man who'd scorned my simple life, to the convicted felon who'd found redemption in truth. From the shame of his public insult, to the pride of watching him save others from similar fates. I've been working with former criminals for 3 years, I said. Might as well make it official with my own son. He smiled. Then the first genuine, unguarded smile I'd seen since before Brad entered our lives. Thanks, Dad, for everything. That evening, our family gathered for Sunday dinner at Frank's house, a tradition we'd maintained through trials and tribulation. The same dining room where Marcus had called me a loser now hosted our weekly reunions, the past acknowledged, but not allowed to poison the present. Emma arrived with her husband Samuel Torres Jr., their relationship having bloomed during the investigation's aftermath. Diane came too humbled by her experiences, but slowly rebuilding her life as a receptionist at a dental office. Even Frank's son Tony was there, having learned his own hard lesson about get-rich-quick schemes. Before we eat, Frank said, raising his glass of water, alcohol had been absent from family dinners since the incident. I want to say something. 3 years ago, we almost lost everything to greed and lies. But we're still here, still family. That's worth celebrating. To family. We echoed, glasses clinking. Marcus sat beside me quiet during most of the meal. I knew he still struggled with facing the relatives he'd tried to defraud, especially Tony, who'd lost $50,000 to Brad's scheme. But slowly, meal by meal, forgiveness was growing. After dinner, as we helped clear dishes, Diane approached me. Cleon, can we talk? We stepped onto Frank's back porch, the stars bright overhead. Diane looked older, but somehow more genuine, the artificial perfection she'd once cultivated, replaced by something real. I wanted to thank you, she said. Not just for stopping Brad, but for how you've helped Marcus. A different man might have let him rot in prison. He's my son. That never changed even when he forgot it. I forgot a lot of things, she said softly. What mattered, what was real. I spent so many years chasing wealth and status, I couldn't see the treasure I already had. We all lose our way sometimes. She smiled sadly. Some of us more dramatically than others. But I'm grateful, Cleon, for your integrity, your forgiveness, for showing our children what real strength looks like. We stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd once promised forever, now finding peace in separate lives touched by shared trauma and redemption. Inside, Marcus was showing Tony something on his laptop. I moved closer, curious. See this pattern? Marcus was saying. 3 emails in quick succession, each with increasing urgency. That's a classic pressure tactic. Legitimate investments never require immediate decisions. He was teaching Tony how to spot fraud, sharing the knowledge that had come at such a terrible price. Tony listened intently, the loss of his $50,000 having made him eager to learn. Marcus is developing an app, Emma announced proudly. Fraud detection for seniors and their families. The FBI's interested in funding it. It's just an idea, Marcus said, embarrassed by the attention. But if we could create something that alerts family members to suspicious financial activity, maybe we could stop these crimes before they happen. I felt a surge of pride. My son using his hard-won expertise to protect others. It was more than I'd dared hope for during those dark days of his arrest. As the evening wound down, Patricia Wells arrived with dessert and news. Brad was transferred to maximum security last week. Apparently, he tried to run a scheme on fellow inmates. Didn't end well for him. No one expressed sympathy. Brad had made his choices, and unlike Marcus, showed no remorse. Reports from prison indicated he still blamed everyone but himself, still schemed and plotted, still believed the world owed him wealth without work. And Morrison? Frank asked. Died 6 months ago, Patricia said quietly. Heart attack in his cell. The stress of losing everything he'd built through corruption was too much. Another cautionary tale, another reminder of where greed ultimately led. As we prepared to leave, Marcus pulled me aside. Dad, I've been thinking about that lemonade stand story. You know, when I was 10 and refused to lower my prices. What about it? I've been telling it wrong all these years. I thought you buying that overpriced cup was enabling my greed. But really, you were teaching me that family supports each other even when we're being foolish. It just took me 25 years to understand the lesson. Better late than never. Yeah, he agreed. Better late than never. The drive home was peaceful. Marcus following in his sensible Honda Civic, a far cry from the BMW Brad had given him. He lived simply now, saving money, not for status, but for the fraud victims fund he'd established. Every month he contributed to helping those who'd lost everything to predators like Brad. Back at my house, we sat on the porch, enjoying the quiet suburban evening. The same porch, where Diane had announced her engagement to Brad, where I'd first sensed the danger approaching our family. You know what I realized in prison, Marcus said suddenly. You were never the loser. You were the winner all along. You had everything that mattered: integrity, family, purpose. I just couldn't see it, because I was blinded by fool's gold. We all have our blind spots, son. Maybe, but some of us drive through them at full speed. He paused, then added, I'm glad you were there to catch me when I crashed. Always will be. We sat in companionable silence, father and son, criminal and crime fighter, broken and healing. The journey from that horrible family dinner to this quiet moment had been brutal, but necessary. Marcus had learned that easy money came with impossible costs. I'd learned that sometimes love meant letting someone fall so they could learn to stand. A text buzzed on Marcus's phone. Another family seeking help, another potential victim hoping to avoid Brad's fate. He showed it to me, already planning his response, ready to share his shameful story if it meant saving someone else's parent or grandparent. Go ahead, I said. I'll see you at the office tomorrow. He stood to leave, then turned back. Hey, Dad, I love you, and I'm proud to be your son. The words I'd waited decades to hear, worth every moment of pain that had brought us here. I love you too, Marcus. Always have. He drove away, taillights disappearing into the night off, to fight the good fight. I remained on the porch, thinking about redemption and second chances, about the price of greed and the value of integrity. Somewhere out there, another Brad was targeting another family. Another Marcus was being seduced by easy wealth. Another Diane was falling for false charm. But now, there were two Mitchells working to stop them. Father and son, united not by money or status, but by purpose and hard-won wisdom. We'd been broken by greed and betrayal, but we'd chosen to let those breaks heal stronger. In the end, that was the greatest treasure of all. Not the money Brad had stolen or the lifestyle he'd promised, but the simple truth that redemption was possible, that families could survive their worst moments, that even the deepest betrayals could become bridges to something better. I went inside past the photos of better and worse times to my office, where tomorrow's cases waited. Another family to protect another predator, to stop another chance to turn pain into purpose. The work never ended. But then again, neither did hope. And in a world full of Brads and Morrisons, hope was the one thing worth more than all the money they could steal. Looking back at that family dinner, 3.5 years ago, when Marcus had stood up with his wine glass and his cruel words, I couldn't have imagined we'd end up here. But perhaps that's the nature of redemption. It comes not from avoiding our falls, but from choosing to rise after them scarred, but wiser, broken, but not beaten. My son had called me a loser that night. Now he knew the truth. There are no winners in the game of greed, only survivors. And survival, especially the kind that transforms pain into purpose, is its own kind of victory. The greatest treasure isn't what we accumulate, but what we become through our trials. Marcus had learned that in the hardest possible way, and in learning it, he'd finally become the son I'd always hoped he could be. Not perfect, not wealthy, not impressive by the world's standards. Just good, just honest, just mine. And that was worth more than all the millions Brad had promised and failed to deliver. As I turned off the lights and headed to bed, one thought echoed in my mind. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to us becomes the best thing that could have happened. Marcus's betrayal had saved him from becoming another Brad. My investigation had saved our family's finances. The trial had saved 17 other families from devastation. Out of greed had come generosity. Out of lies had come truth. Out of betrayal had come a bond stronger than ever before. If that wasn't redemption, I didn't know what was. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new predators to stop, new victims to protect. But tonight, I slept peacefully, knowing my son was out there somewhere using his worst mistake to prevent others from making the same one. The boy who'd worn suits to kindergarten, who'd memorized the Forbes list, who'd valued worth in dollars, had finally learned what really mattered. And in teaching others that lesson, he'd found his own worth at last. Not in money, not in status, but in service integrity and the hard-won wisdom that comes from falling all the way down and choosing to climb back up. My son, the former convict. My son, the fraud fighter. My son, the redeemed. Finally, fully and forever, my son. Dear friends, if you've stayed with me through this entire journey, I want to ask you something. Have you ever faced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you find the strength to forgive? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories help others realize they're not alone in their struggles. And if this story touched your heart or taught you something valuable about protecting yourself and your loved ones from financial predators, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of redemption and justice. Share this with anyone who needs to hear that second chances are possible, that families can heal, and that sometimes our worst moments become the catalysts for our greatest transformations. Thank you for joining me on this difficult but ultimately hopeful journey. Remember, true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the integrity we maintain and the people we choose to become after our failures. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay wise, and most importantly, stay true to what really matters in life.